At 55, MacKenzie Scott could have said nothing. She could have walked away, stayed quiet, and left the world to speculate. But instead, she chose to speak. And what she said stunned everyone. "He broke my heart, but I'd still choose him again." The man she's talking about? Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world. The man who built an empire with her at his side, only to walk away, hand in hand with another woman. MacKenzie had every reason to be bitter, every reason to lash out. A betrayal broadcast to billions, and a new romance that felt like salt in the wound. But instead of revenge, she chose reflection. Instead of attacking, she confessed love. But why? What could drive someone to stand in front of the world and forgive the person who shattered their world? To answer that, we have to go back to where it all began, before Amazon, before the billions, before the affair, when it was just two people and a dream, one that would eventually cost her everything. And in that story is a kind of heartbreak that not even money could fix. The rise and early years, long before the billions, before Amazon, and before the betrayal, there was just Jeff and MacKenzie. Jeff Bezos was born in 1964 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. His early life was shaped by change. His mother, a teenager at the time, remarried when Jeff was 4. Her new husband, Miguel Bezos, a Cuban immigrant, adopted Jeff and gave him his last name. From an early age, Jeff showed signs of a restless, analytical mind. He dismantled his crib as a toddler, built alarms to keep siblings out of his room. He wasn't just curious, he was obsessed with systems. He went to Princeton University, where he studied electrical engineering and computer science. Wall Street came calling, and Jeff climbed fast at D.E. Shaw, one of the most elite hedge funds in New York. But while everyone else focused on finance, Jeff was quietly obsessed with something else: scale. He once told colleagues he wanted to build something so big it would change the way people live. That's where MacKenzie Tuttle entered the picture. Raised in San Francisco by a homemaker mother and a financial planner father, MacKenzie grew up with a deep love for storytelling. At Princeton, she studied under Toni Morrison, the Nobel Prize-winning author, who later called her one of the best students she ever had. MacKenzie wasn't flashy. She was cerebral, private, fiercely loyal. It wasn't love at first sight, it was faster. When MacKenzie Tuttle walked into D.E. Shaw, expecting a job interview, what she didn't expect was Jeff Bezos. He was quirky, brilliant, and utterly fixated on the future. She fell for his laugh before anything else. Within 3 months, they were married. It wasn't a glamorous start. No mansion, no private jets. Just two idealists in a tiny apartment with big ideas. Jeff had a vision, an online bookstore that could one day sell everything. And MacKenzie? She didn't just support the idea, she co-engineered it. In 1994, they packed up their life and drove across the country to Seattle. Along the way, she drove, while Jeff typed out Amazon's first business plan in the passenger seat. She was the first bookkeeper, the first HR rep, the first everything. When Amazon needed a name, she helped choose it. When they needed deals, she negotiated them. When it was time to build, she was on the front lines, not behind the scenes. They weren't just building a business. They were building a life, hand in hand, one sleepless night at a time. MacKenzie believed in Jeff before anyone else did. Before the billions, before the headlines, before the betrayal. But something happened on the way to the top. The more Amazon grew, the less visible MacKenzie became. The spotlight narrowed, and it was Jeff who stood in it, alone. The marriage, family, and sacrifice. MacKenzie Scott didn't just marry a man, she bet her life on a vision. A shared vision, one that would make them the richest couple in the world, and, ultimately, tear them apart. When Amazon took off, Jeff Bezos became a tech titan. His name headlined magazines. His net worth climbed past countries. But in the background, MacKenzie was making an entirely different kind of investment. Her time, her ambition, her identity. She gave up the spotlight. She gave up control. She gave up herself. While Jeff built his empire, MacKenzie built their home, 4 kids, a life of quiet consistency. She wrote novels in the margins of her day, squeezing her own dreams between school lunches and bedtime stories. Her debut, The Testing of Luther Albright, won the American Book Award, not because of the Bezos name, but because she earned it. But even then, she refused the fame. No press tours, no brand deals, no headlines. That wasn't her style. What mattered most to MacKenzie was family. She once called Jeff her best friend. She never flaunted their marriage, never gave interviews. She believed in privacy, in loyalty, in love. But love is a two-way street, and Jeff had started taking a different route. While she stayed home nurturing their children, Jeff was flying coast to coast, taking meetings, launching rockets, and orbiting his new life. The man she built Amazon with, the man she once drove across the country for, was becoming a stranger. Still, MacKenzie stayed. She protected their children from the glare of the spotlight. She defended their image. She held on to what they had, even as it slipped away. But behind the scenes, the distance was turning into detachment, and detachment into something darker. By 2018, the warmth was gone. The silence between them was no longer comforting. It was cold. Still, MacKenzie never aired their issues. She kept it graceful. She kept it quiet. Until it wasn't quiet anymore. The affair that changed everything. The announcement came on January 9, 2019. After 25 years of marriage, Jeff Bezos and MacKenzie Scott were getting a divorce. The tone was polished, respectful, and carefully worded, as if nothing dramatic had occurred. But 2 days later, that illusion collapsed. The National Enquirer dropped an explosive exposé revealing that Jeff Bezos had been having an affair with Lauren Sanchez, a former TV news anchor and helicopter pilot. The two had been secretly involved for months. What made it worse was the timing. Bezos and MacKenzie were still married when the affair began. Lauren wasn't just any woman. She had a flashy, well-documented past in media and Hollywood circles. She co-hosted Good Day LA, founded a helicopter film company, and was known for her connections in elite circles. Confident, camera-ready, and bold. She was everything MacKenzie had deliberately never been. The Enquirer claimed to have tracked Bezos and Lauren across secret hotel rendezvous, exchanged steamy texts, and even explicit selfies, some allegedly too graphic to print. Their timeline suggested that the affair had been going on for nearly a year. Public reaction was swift and merciless. Memes flooded Twitter. News outlets ran endless loops of Bezos and Sanchez stepping off private jets. The richest man in the world had become late-night comedy fuel. And MacKenzie, quiet, dignified, betrayed, became the unexpected heroine in the mess. The contrast between the two women couldn't be sharper. MacKenzie had built Amazon alongside Jeff, raised their children, stayed out of the spotlight, and focused on substance over show. Lauren, in the public's eyes, was all style, all noise. The woman who entered a marriage and left it in pieces. And through it all, MacKenzie said nothing. No interviews, no denials, no social media quotes. She didn't need to speak, because the story was speaking for itself. Within weeks, the narrative had flipped. Jeff wasn't the admired innovator anymore. He was the scandal-ridden billionaire. And Lauren? She wasn't a romantic lead. She was the villain in the breakup of America's perfect couple. But MacKenzie, she stayed calm. Because while they were leaking texts and chasing cameras, She was planning something bigger, something that would change her reputation and countless lives forever. The divorce settlement and her classy comeback. When the dust settled, MacKenzie walked away with 25% of their shared Amazon stock, around 4% of the company, worth over $35 billion. She gave Jeff voting control. No courtroom battles. No dragged-out settlements. Just grace. It was one of the largest divorce settlements in history. To the tabloids, it was jaw-dropping. To MacKenzie, it was just a tool, a means to do what she'd been quietly doing for decades. Build something meaningful. But this time, she wasn't building an empire for someone else. She was building something for the world. There was no press conference, no reality show deals, no tell-all memoir. Instead, MacKenzie signed the Giving Pledge. While Jeff and Lauren were soaking up headlines with their new romance and luxury getaways, MacKenzie released a calm, thoughtful public letter announcing her intentions. "I have a disproportionate amount of money to share," she wrote, "and I will keep at it until the safe is empty." That sentence became a rallying cry, but it was what she did next that stunned the world. She didn't sit on her wealth. She unleashed it. At a pace the philanthropic world had never seen before, MacKenzie began giving away billions, quietly, strategically, and with zero desire for recognition. No press blitz, no foundation galas, no interviews, just results. By 2025, she had donated over $19 billion to more than 1,600 nonprofit organizations. From food banks and educational equity to climate justice and domestic violence shelters, MacKenzie's donations came without strings, paperwork, or red tape. They arrived via email, often shocking recipients who never even applied for the money. And that was the point. MacKenzie trusted people to know what their communities needed. She wasn't interested in controlling how the money was spent. She was interested in leveling the playing field, and fast. She gave $40 million to Howard University, $275 million to Planned Parenthood, hundreds of millions to tribal colleges, rural communities, public libraries, and small grassroots groups that never make the news. Every check, every donation, every act of generosity was another quiet thunderclap. In an age where billionaires build spaceships and argue on social media, MacKenzie did something radically different. She gave and disappeared. And that silence? It spoke volumes. Meanwhile, Jeff Bezos, still the richest man in the world, was being publicly questioned about how little he was giving. He promised billions, eventually. But the contrast with MacKenzie was glaring. She gave. He promised. She rebuilt. He posed. And Lauren? She leaned into the luxury. Tabloid shots of yachts and red carpets. Smiles for the cameras beside him. Designer gowns and curated statements. She became a symbol, not of love, but of disruption. To many, she wasn't a new chapter. She was a scar. And still, MacKenzie said nothing. Her silence wasn't submission, it was strategy. MacKenzie was moving money at speeds that made headlines, but not by her design. She refused interviews, rejected praise, and let the work speak. And in that contrast, something shifted. The world stopped seeing her as Bezos's ex. She had rewritten the script. She was now the woman who took a public betrayal and flipped it into the greatest philanthropic movement of a generation. A woman who proved that dignity doesn't mean silence, and revenge doesn't require shouting. Lauren Sanchez may have walked away with Jeff, but MacKenzie Scott walked away with power, peace, and a purpose far louder than any affair. Second love and the raw confession. After reclaiming her life, her voice, and her purpose, MacKenzie Scott did something no one expected. She opened her heart again. In 2021, she married Dan Jewett, a Seattle high school science teacher. It wasn't a power match. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It wasn't a headline grabber. It was quiet, genuine, and shockingly normal. A woman who had once stood beside the richest man in the world now chose a man who taught chemistry in classrooms and lived far from the cameras. For MacKenzie, it seemed like a breath of fresh air. Dan Jewett wasn't interested in fame. He wasn't building rockets or corporations. He was a man of simplicity, humble, intelligent, and grounded. The world applauded the match. People called it refreshing, a soft reset, proof that MacKenzie had not only moved on financially, but emotionally. He even joined her in signing the Giving Pledge. For a brief time, it looked like MacKenzie had rewritten her love story, this time on her terms. But that chapter ended quietly, too. In 2023, she filed for divorce. No press release, no messy headlines, just a brief legal update, over before most even noticed. And then came the line that stunned everyone. In a private conversation that later went viral, MacKenzie was asked about her past with Jeff Bezos. Her answer wasn't scripted, it wasn't careful, it was raw. "He broke my heart, but I'd still choose him again." The world paused. After everything? After the betrayal, the affair, the public unraveling? Yes, because MacKenzie wasn't interested in rewriting history. She was honoring it, exactly as it was. The good, the painful, the real. That one sentence held decades of emotion. It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't a plea. It was a truth that millions could relate to. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the same people who shaped us the most. Her words weren't weakness. They were a window into a soul that still believed in love, even after losing it twice. The media dissected it. Fans argued over it. Some called her naive. Others called her brave. But no matter how you interpret it, one thing is undeniable. MacKenzie Scott didn't let heartbreak define her. She used it to define something far more powerful: herself. MacKenzie Scott's story isn't a tragedy. It's a quiet revolution. She didn't write headlines. She didn't hold grudges. She didn't fire back. What she did was rarer and louder. In a world obsessed with revenge, she forgave. She gave. She moved forward without ever needing to look back in anger. She lost the man she built an empire with. She watched him walk away, hand in hand with someone who seemed to relish the fame MacKenzie always ran from. She endured betrayal, public scrutiny, and personal heartbreak, twice. But she never became bitter. Instead, she became better. While Lauren Sanchez posed on red carpets, MacKenzie wired millions to struggling communities. While tabloids chronicled Jeff's vacations, MacKenzie funded college tuitions for people she never met. While the world talked about Bezos' next rocket launch, MacKenzie was busy launching hope in places billionaires never glance at. She could have let the scandal define her. She let her generosity do that instead. And then, after all of it, after 2 divorces, after billions given away, after every headline faded, she still said she would choose Jeff again. Not because she forgot what happened, but because she remembered everything that mattered: the love, the partnership, the foundation, the growth. MacKenzie Scott's life isn't about a man or an affair or a fortune. It's about grace in the face of devastation, power in the form of humility, and the kind of strength that doesn't shout, but still shakes the world. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of wealth that actually matters. No revenge, no drama, just legacy,